everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I want to thank all of the panelists who are joining us today, as well as everyone who's tuning in. I'm just going to run through who we have joining us today, and then I will kick off with some high-level thoughts of where IDC and I see the IT and tech market in general. And then we'll dive into a robust discussion specific to the media and entertainment industry and some of the opportunities and challenges in that industry today. So joining us today are Todd Schneider, the Chief Technology Officer of Dejero. We also have Cindy McKenzie, Chief Information Officer at Deluxe. We have Atilla Tinic, who is from Dish. We have Reitenbach from G-Core Labs. We have Dan Williams from Roblox. And we have Dhaval from Tata Communications. Now, in a few minutes, I will ask each of these panelists to introduce themselves and tell us just in a quick 15 to 30-second elevator pitch what they and their companies do. But we're going to start off with a short presentation for me to tell you about the media and entertainment industry in general. You know, it's been a really exciting and interesting and dynamic year in the media and entertainment sector. And then the coronavirus came along this year. You know, on the one hand, the coronavirus was a disaster for a lot of people. Reliance on crowd participation for sports and live concerts and events were just not compatible with social distancing. On the other hand, digital transformation was already well occurring in the media and entertainment industry. And the crisis has really driven an acceleration of digital transformation in this industry. We've seen well-established business models that have been adapting to this new reality. And really, we see businesses changing, although in a new way now. So it's really essential for enterprise CIOs to share the successes that they've seen, to learn from each other's experience, and start defining roadmaps of this new, better normal that we're going to have. So we're excited to bring you the insights from these selected CIOs and technology leaders from the media and entertainment sector at this virtual roundtable for a discussion on the media industry, collaboration, the role of technology in their enterprises today. We'll hear about the latest developments and new solutions and plans for their future roadmap for technology. But like I said, I'm going to start with some high-level thoughts of where IDC sees the IT industry and the networking industry specifically. So let's dive right into that and go on to the next slide here. So we are in an exciting stage of digital transformation right now. IDC says that we are in the third platform of digital transformation right now. You can think of the first platform as the mainframe era, the second platform as the client server era. And for about the last 10 plus years, since about 2007, we've been in this era of the third platform, which is really defined by technologies such as cloud and mobile, social, big data. And the first step of that third platform was really an experimental phase. And now we are moving on into the second phase of the third platform called multiplied innovation. And that's where we are today. This is an era where we are seeing increased use of these third platform technologies. And as organizations increasingly use these technologies, they're getting multiplied levels of innovation from these technology platforms. We're also seeing some exciting new technologies come about, such as AI, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain, technologies like this that are just in the early days of being widely adopted at this point. And just as a preview of where we see this going, a third chapter of the third platform, if you will, is a stage of autonomous use of these third platform technologies. This is a stage that we're just on the cusp of, and we're going to see exponential value from the use of AI. We're going to start to see quantum computing come about to really drive some business engagements. So as we move on, one key point that I wanted to make is how important the network is for enabling digital transformation. The network really is a foundational layer for enabling the secure and scalable and efficient use of these third platform technologies. And at IDC, we're increasingly seeing that enterprises are really using the network as a digital transformation platform to be able to enable digital transformation within their business. They're transforming their networks to be able to do that. So as we move on, we can think about some of the challenges that enterprises are facing as they are transforming their networks. And these requirements that enterprises have for their networks continue to expand. There are three confluencing things that are coming together that represent these challenges. Number one is the huge increase in the number of devices that need to be connected. We estimate that there could be billions, up to 31 billion IoT devices that need to be connected in the coming years. And so this huge increase and influx of new devices that need to be connected is one trend. The other trend, and this is, I know, seen in the media and entertainment industry, is the high bandwidth applications that we see going across the network. The need for 4K, 8K, holographic level of bandwidth requirements for voice and video communication over the network. That's the second major challenge. And then the third one is the latency challenge. There's this expectation from users and devices to have lower latency connections over this network. So when you think of these three factors coming together, more devices, requiring lower latency connections, utilizing higher bandwidth applications, it really creates a challenging environment for enterprises and is really causing them to transform their networks to enable that digital transformation. So enterprises are looking for networks to be fast and adaptive. They're looking for capacity on demand. They're looking for edge to cloud latency for these applications and network level security. And you can see in this cube here some of the use cases that we see driving this network transformation today, from immersive gaming experiences and telehealth, from virtual reality across a number of different sectors, smart cities and connected cars, for the low latency financial transactions and cloud applications. It's really defining the era of network transformation. So, but again, you can't talk about this year without talking about COVID. So as we move on, COVID-19 has really dramatically shaped 2020 this year so far, and unfortunately in a number of not good ways. But one thing that we hear a lot about is flattening the curve, if you will, in relation to the virus. Well, IDC thinks about flattening the curve in another way, and that is moving on from the different stages that we've seen enterprises in their COVID response. So some of the initial stages of the COVID response in the spring of this year, it was a mindset around business continuity and cost optimization. How do I continue my business operations? How do I optimize costs where I need to be? How do I get my business to be more resilient? And now we're in this phase of organizations looking to make targeted investments into their future technology roadmaps. And we're going to hear from some of the panelists today about what some of those technology roadmap investments could be into the future. And it's really getting to a point of the future enterprise and what their new normal operations are going to look like into the future. And so this idea of flattening the curve is getting to these various levels, these various stages of the process faster and really flattening the curve, staying less in the economic slowdown and recession stages, and getting to that return to growth and getting to that next new normal at a faster pace. So where are we as enterprises are in this stage? And as we move on to look at some of the survey data, so IDC has collected survey data since March. We've done what we've called a pulse survey every 2 weeks, and that's continuing into the fall now, where we are asking enterprises around the world about their spending plans for technology and networking specifically. So this question specifically was asking, compared to your original plans in 2020, how do you think your organization's actual spending on network equipment, products, and services is going to be affected due to COVID? And you can see in the blue here are an organization had a choice of we're going to decrease our spending, we're going to have no change to our spending, or we're going to increase our spending. And you can see between March and August, the networking buyers are becoming more optimistic on their investment plans. So in March, between March and August, there was almost a 9-point decrease in respondents who said that they were going to be decreasing their spending on network equipment. And on the plus side, there was more than a 6-point increase in respondents who said that they were going to be increasing their spending on network equipment. So again, we've seen this trend even continue into our September surveys as well. And the general takeaway here is that networking buyers are becoming more optimistic as they are realizing this new normal that their businesses are in. They're looking to make targeted investments into technologies that help their organizations in that new normal. So as we move on, we can take a look at what some of those targeted investments are. So we asked folks to rank on a 1 to 3 scale, plus and minus, so -3 up to +3, of how your spending sentiment, what your spending sentiment is across these categories. And so it'll show you the major categories where enterprises are going to be increasing spending, keeping spending about the same, or decreasing spending. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that security is a top area of increased spending. Other areas of increased spending, cloud and IoT as well. And finally, 5G as well, which we're just starting to see important investments in 5G network infrastructure. In terms of technologies that are going to stay relatively flat, that's where we see things like AI and robotics. Not an increase in spending in those categories, but not a decrease either. And then a slight decrease in technology like big data and blockchain. So that's a look at the IT overall. And as we move on, we can look at some networking specific survey data as well. So this was a question asking about your network investment priorities into the future and what specific areas are organizations going to be investing in for their networks specifically. And you can see increased reliance on automation platforms to reduce the manual management of the network was the top response. Second response around remote management of network operations was a key as well. And we saw other top responses around security, being able to secure applications, being able to use cloud-based platforms for these applications, and being able to increase the visibility and analytics, the user performance and assurance capabilities of these networks. So as I hope that this my discussion here is a good launching off point to launch into a discussion with our esteemed CEOs and technology leaders from the media and entertainment industry. And so in a moment, I'll ask the CIOs and our panelists who are joining us today if they could each introduce themselves and tell us a quick 15-second what your company does and your role within that company. That would be greatly appreciated. So I'll start with Cindy, if you don't mind, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
So I'm Cindy McKenzie. I'm the CIO for Deluxe Entertainment Services. So Deluxe is over 100-year-old company that is in the post-production business. We do everything from digital cinema to over-the-top services for a bunch of companies, white labeled. We do digital transformation of assets, and then we do the full localization, so dubbing, subtitling, and then the full gamut of creative services, including visual effects, colorization, general post-production. So a large company, global, we have over 50 offices. So I should say one thing, we just sold half the business in July. So we sold distribution off. We're still, fully one company in terms of services until we can separate, but we sold distribution off, and we'll be focusing on creative moving forward. But when we went through COVID, it was all one company. So
Okay.
that's who we are.
Sounds great. Thanks, Cindy. Todd, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Sure, Brandon. I'm Todd Schneider. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Dejero. In my role, I'm responsible for all of our product development teams, DevOps, the cloud teams, cloud services, and IT. Dejero has been in business for just over 10 years, and we support our customers to send mission-critical live video and real-time data anywhere. We aggregate diverse connectivity paths, so cellular, satellite, and broadband, to deliver improved reliability, expanded coverage, and greater bandwidth to organizations. What that kind of rolls out in terms of business is our core business that we've been at for about 10 years is in broadcast video, so servicing broadcast video customers in news gathering, things like that. And we have a rapidly emerging business actually in the connectivity space, where we're taking that core technology, our smart blending technology, and using that really for solving first and last mile problems. And to kind of steal something from you, Brandon, we're building the foundation of first and last mile. So we make it more reliable, faster. It's all cloud-based, it's all controllable, it's all remote controllable. So really just kind of using technology in a way that frankly would help on this call. Because I know at the start of this call, we had some connectivity challenges. I was sitting here thinking, I'd love to ship something to help out with that.
Sounds great. Thanks, Todd. Atilla, let's go to you and hear about Dish.
Hi, Brandon. Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I'm Atilla Tinic. I'm Chief Information Officer here at Dish. So I'm responsible for everything IT oriented with our multiple lines of business. And the reason I say that is because I think most people are probably familiar with Dish and our pay TV business. The other brand that we also support is Sling, which is our live over-the-top streaming television service. And then we also have another brand called OnTech, which is a smart home services solution that we leverage today as well. And then, of course, we are accelerating our adventure into the wireless industry, and a lot of my work also pertains to our new efforts there in the wireless front.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Atilla. Andre, let's hear about G-Core Labs.
Yeah, hello, I'm Reitenbach. I'm CEO of the G-Core Labs, and our main business is Edge for entertainment and media business. I mean, Edge nowadays, but we do it already since, I would say, 8 years, and we provide infrastructure, low latency, zero latency for gaming, because it was already important for gaming since years. Nowadays, it's started to be important to different other businesses and entertainment, but back in the days, gaming was a driver for this kind of infrastructure. So we built and operate locations worldwide, covering almost whole world. We just closing last dots in Africa and providing CDN, media platform, zero latency player, hosting bare metal, security services, of course. It's quite important, especially since COVID. And since COVID as well, we started to provide development services to integrate parts of our code and parts of media platform for medical services and AR, VR tools, because this becomes really important since the COVID, and it seems to take off. We tried this already for several years without any big interest, but now it seems that companies start to invest into this. So this is our main business so far.
Mm. Okay, great. And Dan, can you tell us about Roblox?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. My name is Dan. I've been at Roblox a little more than 3 years. Roblox is a gaming development platform enabling external devs to develop experiences, and then we offer those experiences to internet users over many platforms. I'm responsible essentially for the corporate IT environment, as well as production infrastructure. So what this means is I'm responsible for ensuring Roblox employees are productive from an IT standpoint, while also being responsible for the distributed global edge cloud that we manage from a compute and networking standpoint. Ultimately, we're responsible for serving Roblox as a service to our external devs as well as users. What we're really building is the infrastructure primitives for the metaverse.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Dan. And last but not least, Dhaval, can you tell us about your role at Tata?
Yeah, hello, Brandon and everyone else. So I'm the global head and MD for the media entertainment business of the Tata Group, headquartered here in London. Tata operates probably the world's largest global media-specific video network, cloud infrastructure, and low latency video streaming or CDN infrastructure globally. We carry upwards of about 700 TV channels, manage about 10,000 events and multitudes of petabytes of cloud content already for the media entertainment industry. Some of the problems that we think about constantly along with our customers and partners is along the lines of what does edge actually mean for media entertainment outside of maybe specific applications. How do we work with 5G to genuinely change the technology makeup fundamentally? Because we own our infrastructure end to end, all the way down to submarine cable systems to data centers where our cloud is hosted. For us, these fundamental shifts would basically boil down to, is it creating more value? Is it disrupting the industry to create additional monetization or genuine differentiation for user experience? Looking forward to the conversation today, Brandon. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks to Dhaval and all the panelists. I really appreciate you being here. So we're going to structure this discussion in two major parts. The first discussion is going to be looking back on the COVID era and how your business changed. And then the second part of this discussion is going to be a more future-looking assessment of how you expect your business is going to continue to change and what these new normal operations are going to be into the future. And so my first question that I wanted to hand off to is really about how did your business change in the COVID era? What were some of the changes that your business had to make to deal with COVID and the fallout from it? What were some of the challenges that you had to face and how did you overcome those? Cindy, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. As I said, we are a bunch of different things and a bunch of different services. So depending on which of the services, they were all impacted differently by COVID. Obviously, things like streaming and localization and, digital transformation of content to go onto streaming platforms was hugely busy. Things like digital cinema pretty much went away overnight, right? If theaters aren't open, we're not sending content to theaters. So it depended on which areas in the business, how we were impacted. So some very positively, some completely negatively. But the one thing about us, and I don't think it applies to most of the other companies, but because we are responsible for other people's content, right? We're servicing Fox's content, so Sony's content, everybody's content. We are guided very, very strongly by security and compliance guidelines, and we get audited, 30, 40 times a year by our customers at each facility to validate that we're meeting security and compliance guidelines. And what that entailed was we ran mostly our production content networks on private networks not connected to the internet. So you can imagine having to move all of that to work remotely was quite a challenge. So we had, over the last few years, moved things like applications and a lot of storage to the cloud, but the production workstations themselves were really on private networks in facilities. And so trying to get that all to move outside in a way that could be audited by the auditors appropriately was quite a challenge. And we had to kind of do it workflow by workflow. We were able to get most everything out working remotely within say 2 to 3 weeks, but there are things that we do that have really, really low latency requirements, things like quality control, where you're trying to validate that your timing on your audio versus your content is exactly matched. You can't have any latency. So there were some things like that it took us a few weeks after the initial move to make work. But it was interesting. We had to pretty much workflow by workflow make things work. And then what ended up happening is within weeks, each of our customers wanted to see what we were doing and validate and approve them. And nobody gave us guidelines. We had to decide what we thought the guidelines were because we didn't have time to wait. And then we went, content protection group by content protection group to show them what we had done and get buy-off on those. So it was a really huge effort for us. Amazingly, we were able to get everybody up and running. The one big product thing for us was dubbing. Dubbing always happens in a studio, and we couldn't get into our studios, but people still wanted to dub. And so we were able to develop, I take no credit for it. It was the product team had been working on a remote cloud-based dubbing solution, and they were able to get that up and out. Pretty much saving that revenue stream, because otherwise we would not have been able to do it until people could get into the studio. So it was a crazy time.
Yeah, those are significant changes that really had to be put into place in a short amount of time.
Yep.
Anyone else want to share some thoughts of COVID experiences?
Sure, I can offer.
Hey, Brandon. Oh, go ahead, Todd.
Okay, thanks, Atilla. So we're a very different organization than Deluxe. We do a lot of product development, which is combination of hardware and software. And so overnight, we had to basically move product development teams to a complete work from home environment. So that was very challenging. Our IT team rose to the challenge, and I mean, we went from having a couple people using a VPN to the entire company on a VPN virtually. So that was very challenging. And what it drove us to do, I think, was really start using our own products for reliable connectivity more and essentially dog fooding, which was great because our customers were going through exactly the same thing. And so we were trying to rise to the challenge because they were doing all sorts of new and unusual things. So at the same time we were experiencing this environment, they were experiencing that environment. So it was kind of good because we could live the same reality. So we ended up rapidly updating products. But I think because the core of our business was already cloud, a lot of the services and infrastructure, it was, in some senses, it was perhaps easier for us because of that. But our DevOps and support teams who are used to working in the office had to just suddenly, okay, everybody work from home. So, we faced some challenges there, but I'd say overall, it was not as bad as I thought it would be.
That's good. Yeah, Atilla.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, yeah, when I listen to Todd, it's a very similar story. Mid-March, I think it was March 15th, and we made the call that everyone's going to work at home from a corporate standpoint, and it literally was a 24-hour window to get everyone enabled and up and running and working at home. And it's similar to what Todd talked about. We're a culture that likes to work together and work on-prem and collaborate, and so it was different for us to enable the work at home posture for all of corporate. In fact, going back to Todd's point about VPN, I mean, we did have more than a few VPN connections, but our high water mark was maybe a little over 2,000. We wanted to be enabled to do 7 times that when we started sending people from home. And so, I agree. Kudos to our IT operations team. They don't often get shout outs. It's a lot of times it's the application development teams to get all the credit, but our IT operations team did a fantastic job of getting everyone up and running. And similar again to what Todd was talking about, the good news is we were already kind of on our cloud journey, and we were also already, in the middle of rolling out some new collaboration tools. And that helped us tremendously because our cloud journey was another example of we didn't have to stress the network because with our identity access management capabilities, people could get to a lot of their core tools straight to the cloud. So that actually relieved stress on our network. And then the collaboration tools was just very powerful and instrumental for us to be successful to have that business continuity going when everyone's in a federated environment.
Right. Yeah, great insights. Thanks. Dan, I want to turn to you and put a little twist on that question and ask, did the investments that you had made in your technology platform pre-COVID, did they live up to the expectations of the new needs that were needed in the COVID era? Or what did that delta, if there is one, look like?
Yeah, similar to what Attila and Todd had alluded to, we had started on a journey, at least for the corporate side, about three years ago, sort of evolving to cloud-based collaboration tools. So thankful that we did that. We actually ran a test a week prior. We shut down on March 6th. So we ran a test a week prior just to sort of see if we can all, and it worked out pretty well. Similar to what others said, we had to up some licensing around VPN and video conferencing, but like outside of that, things were great. If we look at the production environment, we run the majority, 100% of gameplay natively through our globally distributed network. So we ultimately run a service provider-like network. We had made investments over the last 3 years to really improve reliability and performance to sort of plan for the unknown unknowns. And I won't say that we necessarily like grew in peak concurrency, but our concurrency trends changed where all of a sudden we didn't have peaks over the weekend. We were having peaks every day now, right? As sort of every day became a Saturday. So thankful that we made those investments, as internally we believe if we did not make those investments, we would have probably not survived the first few weeks, or survive's a strong word. I would say it would have been a lot more stressful. And so it was less stressful than expected because we baked in a bunch of buffer, which now has proven and given us sort of gas, if you will, to continue to fund and expand globally.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Andre, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this situation. What did you see at your company as a result of COVID?
Well, I just can probably add similar view from the colleagues before. So let's say we are quite a new company and our DNA is coming from gaming. So the average, so most of our people are millennials or Z generation. So we already adapted to be quite flexible and be not binded to an office. We don't have fixed mobile phones. We have just mobile phones and laptops. So people are working from everywhere. Of course, we have offices, but especially because in our business, we have to look for talents. We don't really bind it somehow to location. So we have already good experience, and we had experience with working from abroad. We have people working from Thailand, from Goa, and from all over the world. And so we didn't have any impact, I would say. I would even say that we had efficiency increase because people stopped spending time to travel to the office. So, and we just moved all communication to the tools. We're working with Slack and all of these Teams and all these tools. So it was already adapted. The probably biggest, and on top of this, it seems that because we're doing infrastructure, we had a lot of additional work to do because all of our customers started to order like crazy equipment and services just to move to the cloud and move to the services. And people, since they're sitting at home, they started to watch TV and playing games. So we usually, especially between March and June, usually in our business, it's low performance because most of the people are going to vacation and so on. But at that time, it was like you would have Christmas every day. And the backside of the whole story, of course, on one hand, we had to build the infrastructure and send our equipment to the data centers worldwide because we have data centers even in somewhere in Sao Paulo. But at the same time, because we have experienced team members who have to travel, we were trapped in the countries, and especially when the borders were closed, so we were not able to send people. So we are relying on the engineers on site. But since even the data centers, they're restricted for people, so it was really challenging time to bring equipment on time. So this was probably the backside of the whole story. This is, of course, but I guess it was for the most of the companies. And on top of this, a lot of telecom companies limited the traffic because since people started to watch YouTube and Netflix and all this media, most of the telecoms faced limitation in the infrastructure. So it was quite interesting time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Dhaval, I'd be interested in your perspective. What have you seen in terms of the increased interest in services that have been needed, really a requirement since COVID started?
Sure thing, Brandon. So as a direct consequence of COVID, first and foremost, live events basically stopped everywhere. As I mentioned, we do thousands of events every year, and the first impact was every single sporting federation was looking for different formats that they could still take to their audience, because ironically, everyone was at home when the need for live content was probably the most. There was nothing available. So we worked with a number of tier 1 sporting federations to sort of develop a virtual form of their sport and take it to their broadcasters. A case in point would be a sort of a global electric motor racing federation created a virtual environment where the same drivers that would race on a normal weekend, let's say at Silverstone, were in their homes and they were racing on a simulator. And that game was superimposed on the same track at the same venue. And we thought this is going to be an interesting one. And when we took it to tier 1 broadcasters, it was not only lapped up by more broadcasters than their actual rights holders, but the viewership and engagement on that piece of content was actually 150% of what they would have normally had at a normal weekend. So they ended up doing this for 11 weekends straight. And this is pretty much like a new broadcast product that they have now created that is going to sort of new fans that were not associated with the sport before. So that was one. I think that was, we expected some gimmick-based content to go through for a short time and a short-term sort of measure. But that is now transformed into a long-term play for virtual sports and esports that is now becoming probably a significant trend for the entire industry. So that was one. Second is, as the event started sort of taking place, they began with South Korea, then parts of Western Europe, and now the Americas as well. So we really had to solve a crucial logistical problem where instead of a team of, even for a remotely produced event or a REMI-based environment, you still have teams of about 50 to 60 individuals traveling to every venue. Now that was shot down to probably a third of that capacity. So we had to really work with some of our closest sports broadcasters and federations to deploy a low latency remote production environment to enable broadcast to take place as normal. In order to do that, so there are a couple of elements that went in here. So one is a low latency video network. But in addition to that, we actually virtualized production applications on our data centers and got them probably to an edge closest to that venue. And what that meant was the producers and editors could actually produce an entire event sitting in their homes. And this is probably the best use case for live editing and live production for an event that is completely virtualized. So what that meant was not only teams could work from home, but your talent pool can now be located anywhere. It pretty much opens up a wide array of skill sets that may not be as available in a particular geography or in a particular country. That was a second one. And the final one was, I think what everyone else has mentioned, the digital transition and the adoption of digital platforms is now so entrenched that the disruption that would have taken 12 to 18 months has basically now taken place in 4 to 6 months. And I think there have been early adopters for this change who have gone in and said, let's experiment and take this out and see what it means. And they have come out really strong out of this. So this is going to be a very significant trend for the entire media entertainment industry. It is not going to be about how many dollars do you allocate to this or how many people do you allocate to this, but it's going to be about the right steps that the senior leadership takes at this stage with a view of the next 4 to 5 years, because they are going to be dramatically different from what we have seen so far, Brandon.
Yeah, it's really interesting perspective. Thanks, Dhaval. So I'd be interested in getting insights from you all about how the investments have changed since COVID. Where are you increasing investments? What have you had to spend more on? Where have you maybe postponed investments or said, we don't need to invest in this right now? Maybe Dan or Todd, would one of you be willing to talk about that?
I would.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
So sort of going off of what Andre alluded to earlier, where things we didn't think about were data centers literally being shut down from any sort of access, for example. So in places that really started to spike, say in Europe or Asia, we had to pull in network and compute capacity that we had planned for later in the year, quarters in. So like obviously we had to work with a bunch of folks to do that. We literally had a day cut off in Singapore where we're actually able to deploy a bunch of cap in Singapore just in time right before they shut down the data center due to COVID. So stress on the team, obviously. And something that Dhaval alluded to as well, where we were able to do it from a remote hand standpoint or a working from home standpoint because we weren't physically able to go there, right? So like that has changed a lot. What we've gone from in terms of Roblox serving from a global standpoint is now we're focused on regional workloads. So we've started to invest heavily in regions that are starting to grow from a concurrency standpoint, as opposed to serving globally. Roblox, as you may know, is a real-time gaming platform, 3D physics engine, where as opposed to just video, where we're linking a bunch of stuff together, you and I are having real-time gaming experiences, and we may be distributed across the globe. So then our experiences themselves have to look similar, or at least one-to-one between us. So low latency, high reliability is important to us. And what we found, continue to invest in infrastructure regionally with a target of being within 15 milliseconds of every major metro. It'll only just create more stickiness, et cetera, for the platform itself, both from the dev standpoint as well as the user standpoint. So a lot of stress on the system, I think, like everyone else alluded to, but what we're finding is investing in the system creates a little less stress, but also creates a little more happiness, if you will.
Happiness is good. Anyone else with thoughts on how investments have changed, where you've had to prioritize investments?
Sure, I'd love
yeah, I don't mind talking about that for a second. Again, we're a little bit different. So we obviously had the same thing I think everybody had, where, we had an immediate cash outlay for more VPN, more VDI, and more. Actually, we had to get laptops because, again, we had a lot of people working on very large workstations for production software. And it had been on our roadmap to try to move these production workflow tools, so things like Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere and those types of things to the cloud-based versions that are out there now. But it had not honestly been a huge priority to the business because it's disruptive, honestly, to have to switch their day-to-day tools when they're swamped. This obviously changed that priority hugely, because at this point we don't have any idea when we're going to come in, and even if we come in, if we're going to have to go back out. And so, that's been the biggest change for us is we've expedited an already existing, initiative because that was our last piece of the pie that hadn't been moved to the cloud for these production workstation tools. And when you think about a production workflow, you've got the asset, you've got your storage, you've got your network, there's a lot of pieces to it. But if the workstation where they're actually working on the content is a big giant workstation sitting in an office, you're never going to be 100% cloud-based. And so that's been a huge change, and it's a huge expense for us because we have thousands of people we're trying to move to those tools as we speak.
Yeah, Todd, did you have a thought on this?
Yeah, I think for us it was a very interesting time because we had made a significant investment in a new cloud-based platform that we actually went live on just as COVID was unfolding. So we did this in like early April because we love to live on the edge and do things remotely. And that actually proved to be very beneficial because at that time, our business had kind of turned upside down because traditionally our customers they're doing a lot of remote contribution and stuff. But what happened was they started essentially building mini studios at home. So you've probably seen all the newscasts from home. A lot of our technology is behind that. And they have like return video with our QPoint product and all sorts of stuff. But what they discovered, I think, was that this broadcast facility that we built, and it's got 5 nines reliability and is really awesome, they can actually continue to run without having to use something like that. And by using lower cost apps, by using stuff on laptops, by using products from us that do return video, or even taking some of our remote contribution technology into the home essentially, they could continue to run. And that kind of stressed us in interesting ways because we weren't really accustomed to that. But fortunately, with the new cloud platform, we could scale up because one of its key things was we wanted lots of horizontal scalability. So much like, Dan kind of alluded to, we got kind of lucky, I guess, in a way. It's not like we saw it coming, but we were just kind of on that journey. And then I think to the point that, Dhaval made, we ended up doing, basically supporting our customers doing massive amounts of remote production. It was just not like anything we'd ever seen. So yeah, it was a very interesting time. And I think we now see, that investment in that cloud platform and ongoing investments in that is even more core to our business.
Yeah, certainly. So I think now would be a good time to transition to the sort of second phase of our discussion. And these are great insights on sort of what the immediate impact was, the really rapid transformation that was not a nice to have, but a requirement for organizations in a very short amount of time. And it sounds like you all have successfully migrated and navigated this very challenging environment. So now the question is, where do we go from here? And specifically, I'd be interested in hearing where are your technology investments going to be into the future? How do you see technology really enabling your business into the future in ways that are different from how it did in the past? And what sorts of technologies are you going to have to rely on to enable that into the future? Atilla, maybe could you start with telling us a little bit about sort of what does the future state for Dish look like? And is that different now that we're in this stage of COVID compared to maybe what it looked like a year ago?
Yeah. Similar to some of my colleagues on the phone, it's interesting because I think I'm hearing a theme that we were all on a kind of our journeys that actually was an enabler during these tough COVID days. And so there's definitely going to be more of that, meaning we're going to continue on our cloud journey. That's an important piece of what we're going to be doing. The collaboration tools are critical, and we were on that journey as well when COVID hit. And it was, like, as I mentioned before, it was instrumental in solving some of the pain points. But over and beyond that, I mean, I think, what we really want to focus on is continuing to build an intelligent enterprise. We want to have the best customer service we possibly can. And a lot of that comes into a couple different things. That really comes back to knowing our customers and enabling our agents and creating a fantastic digital experience. So AI ML is going to be a big piece of that going forward for us. I could break that down into a few different components. One is, the machine learning that sits on top of all the data we have that helps us understand those elements of ease of doing business and how we acquire customers and what are the patterns we see there, as well as when customers are leaving, how do we get insights from all the data we have, and what are the tools we can put in place that are from a machine learning standpoint that build the patterns out, as well as driving an efficient business, whether it's our manufacturing group or our advertising media, or it's our manufacturing group or in-home services. We want to make sure that we're driving efficiency both for our customers as well as cost within our business. So that's one piece of it. But then the other piece is taking AI ML and embedding it into the tools that both our agents use or our customers use from a self-service standpoint. So we're continuing to focus on that outstanding customer experience. So we built or implemented tools that have AI capabilities that do an assist for an agent so that when a customer has inquiries, we get to the answers quickly, or suggestions quickly for our customers going forward. Or if a customer is buying something with us online, we want to be able to give them the ideal recommended package or services that meets their needs. I'd say the final thing in terms of that is also another subset of AI is NLP, which is natural language processing. It's another big piece of where we're implementing, whether it's in our products like our voice remotes, or whether it's in the IVR for our customers to be able to come in and do speech recognition directly into the IVR itself. So we want to automate as much as we possibly can. I think a lot of it starts with data, and a lot of it starts with the insights we get from data and how do we glean that in an AI ML environment. So,
yeah, that's really interesting, Attila. The topic of ML and AI is one we hear about a lot, and it's always interesting to hear about real world examples of how this is actually being used. I'm wondering if anyone else has some thoughts about that. Cindy, I know you were thinking about how ML and AI could help your business into the future too, right?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot with ML because if you think about what we do, it's kind of the typical use case, right? Translation. So localization is all translations. So we've been doing it to try to get to some language translation, at least to like an 80% level, and then we can modify from there. It actually has worked really well for us for conforming. Conforming is where you have to take a piece of content and match whatever local rules are for the content. So for example, people can't smoke on film in Saudi Arabia. And so whether it's nudity or alcohol or smoking, those are actually pretty easy ML use cases, right? Find the smoke, find the cigarette, and remove it, right? And so that actually has been one that we've been very successful at automating. But even, a lot of what we do, actually, there is some lower level use cases that could be automated that then allows us to, concentrate our resources on the harder pieces. So we use it for scheduling as well. All kinds of, there's a lot of stuff that we do that we have been able to automate with machine learning, and things like translations really aren't there yet, but we continue to work with it because it's close, right? And if we can do it for some use cases, it works. And our business, we've tended to only work with the very large players, the Netflix, Hulu's, Fox, et cetera. But if you think about the content provider network now, everybody makes content, right? You could call this event right now content, right? And you may want to localize this and put it up on different platforms in different parts of the world. And the more that we can commoditize a lot of these services, the more we can open it up to a fully automated service that some players in the market who aren't going to pay for Deluxe's normal white glove service would really get the benefit. So we've been on a full digitization journey for the majority of what we do, with the idea that we'd only add the 10 to 15% of white glove where needed. So right. I think AI is big for that, and then fully enabling each of our workflows to be fully automated is the other piece we've been working on.
Yeah, it's really an exciting time for some of these technologies. Like I talked about, getting multiple levels of innovation from using these technologies into the future, which is only going to expand. I'd be interested in transitioning the topic more to the infrastructure layer around connectivity, and maybe Dan or Andre, maybe you could tackle this in terms of what is your infrastructure gonna look like? How is that going to continue to change? What role is cloud playing? How does the edge, how is the definition of where the edge is? How is that going to change into the future from a content perspective? And from infrastructure in general, how do you expect that to continue to change into the future?
Yeah,
please proceed.
Thanks, Andre. Brandon, I think as you alluded to early on, the network is so core to some of these applications that without a solid road to drive on, we can't do anything, right? So when I started a few years ago, a lot of what we were doing was based on party, and we saw a real opportunity to sort of build our own infra. So we've done that over the last few years. As an early-ish adopter of 100 gig interfaces, we are basically going through our network and doing as much as we can to expand capacity globally, with a heavy emphasis and focus on peering, so that we can sort of like build our own infrastructure in a way that we bypass the quote unquote dirty internet. A lot of what we do is edge focused. So we try to push as much to the edge as possible to be in or near region as possible, so that we can provide these gaming experiences that require near real-time experiences, as well as dev services to build these things. A lot of this, though, as we're in sort of like work from home mode for the unforeseeable future, requires a ton of automation. We certainly use ML at Roblox, but that's more on the content filtering side, so not explicitly focused on the network. That we do a lot of traffic engineering around user quality, reliability, where we're not always focused on where a human might be, but we're focused on the performance that they're receiving from a client standpoint. So leveraging both peering, matchmaking, gobs of capacity on the edge and backbone to ensure that users have the best experience is really our focus. But just watching things expand so quickly, where we're moving at a pace that I did not expect to, is probably more of the challenge here, especially as other providers that et cetera are also giving gobs of capacity to other large content folks. So now we're sort of in this race to sort of build these large expansive networks while the capacity exists. I will just say, and I'm sure like many agree, thank goodness we're going through this in 2020, because I don't think we get through this in 2010.
Yeah, it's really good point, Dan. Andre, very interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yes, I can just agree with Dan, because let's say companies like Roblox are our main clients, and let's say in the past we built already such a network where we've been at the edge where the player is to provide the low latency. But nowadays, let's say it was focused back in the days mainly US, Europe, then Eastern Europe, Japan, and South Asia. But nowadays it moves even more to the countries, let's say, where the infrastructure is behind for 5 to 10 years for different reasons, monopolistic structures, and let's say technology not that progressing. And we see right now also progressing of internet exchanges in all over the world. And we see also that the energy ports are more available just to manage all of this crazy amounts of traffic, which is growing. And I would say like 2-3 years ago, when 400G ports were announced, I would say, who will ever need this? I mean, 100G wasn't enough. We've been happy with 10G, but nowadays I already understand our biggest routers are already full with 100G ports, and we already need to extend it again. So it's start to be interesting to migrate to the next level on the first step in the main hubs. And we see more 100G ports already on the edge. And so the biggest trend in the future is that we will move even from this access next to the edge where we put the equipment, and we already started with this as a CDN. Let's say we are already in this a bit longer than the typical content. So we're putting more equipment into the providers networks, directly into the providers network, that we even limit the gap and probably overusage and limitation on the access and on the hubs. So we are as direct as possible to the telecoms. And actually we see telecoms coming to us in the content, because there's a lot of content to ask us to move the equipment to the edge. And let's say CDN was in the back, the platform and the infrastructure we called edge, but nowadays more services moving to the edge, like compute, DNS, and media, and everything is going to be regionally hosted. So we don't have huge hubs where everything is depending if it's available or not. So this is the main trend. And of course, not only gaming right now moving to this direction, also media, everything where you need lowest latency, especially where you have to make decisions like in the banking or even, let's say, in the entertainment industry, in gambling industry, yeah, where the latency is important, that you microseconds are important to make a decision, then you need, of course, to be as next as possible to the content.
Yeah. Yeah, Dhaval, interested in your perspective on how you see the definition of the edge evolving into the future and what technology is going to be needed to enable that new definition of the edge.
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, I have, pardon.
No, go on, Andre.
I just we have some curiosity, what was acceptable back in the days and what's not. For example, we have one huge client called Wargaming, you know, World of Tanks, and had like a game hosted somewhere in Singapore, and players in Australia had to play in Singapore, and they used to aim before like a couple of meters before the tank, because they know 250 milliseconds is enough, and in reality the tank will be in the aiming point. But nowadays nobody will accept this, so you have to be next to the customer.
Absolutely. No, so Brandon, I think one point that Andre mentioned about 100 gig ports at the edge, and I think we've been operating at 100 gig sort of port capacity levels for some time at individual locations, and I'm sure Atilla and Cindy will sort of attest to that. But I think at the end of last year, when we were sort of looking at upgrading our entire sort of video backbone, and we spoke with our sort of top 5 CTOs in terms of what do they expect in terms of future requirements. And it was unanimous that it would be multitudes of 100 gig at a backbone level, which means that wherever you are, I mean, and this backbone goes to more than 500 locations globally, and operating a full core at multitudes of 100 gig was a significant step forward. And at that time, it felt a little bit aspirational. So when we looked at the business case along with the future growth of video streaming generally for the entire industry, as we would, we thought that this is going to be a little bit aspirational. But I can say for a fact that that was probably a very wise move now, because all of those video streaming consumption numbers have already been hit. So at a core level, we are looking at a lot of increase in capacity for video consumption. It is mainly driven by a lot of premium content, live premium content, which is all viewed in 4K, which still continues to drive a significant subscription revenue as well. And live content has many facets, not just sports, but a lot of other music events like the WHO Lady Gaga concert that took place a couple of months ago, or you have many esports sort of events that are being viewed more than traditional sporting federations. So that is on the investment side. When it comes to edge, as I said, and I think something that Cindy was mentioning earlier, that when they look at sort of specific technologies, they would look at sort of what is the impact that is having at a fundamental group level. So we firmly believe that edge as a deployment needs to have a fundamental difference, not only in terms of cost structures, but also in terms of what are the specific workflows that are enabled by having your applications and your hardware at the edge. And if you think about it, it has to be something meaningful. It has to result in probably 2x or 3x of your capabilities right now for it to genuinely make a difference at a balance sheet at a global level. And we firmly believe that a lot of applications, when it comes to production of events, a lot of data that needs to be looked at in a low latency local environment. For example, identity verification, a lot of IoT devices sort of coming together and making those decisions at the edge instead of sort of tramboning back and forth, and having application aware sort of workflows is going to be key. And that would mean, for especially for media entertainment, what would that would mean is it's going to give a significantly better user experience. And if a few firms are able to differentiate themselves so far ahead in terms of their user experience, that is going to be key. So right now you have a few leaders. Like, I mean, for example, Netflix has established a global standard when it comes to video viewership, right? I mean, in terms of user experience. And I think Edge is going to give that that type of capability to a host of new entrants and host of new players. And that will have immense ramifications. It can lead to a sort of a complete revolution to the way esports are currently being viewed and played. You will also have social media integration like never before, not only for live sports but also for entertainment. And that sort of merging of sort of specific use cases and, more importantly, commercial models, which is the intersection of, let's say, media entertainment, social media, and hence monetization. That is going to be quite key, and that will also establish the business case and long-term viability for edge use cases, Brendan.
Yeah, really, really interesting points there. Well, we are almost out of time here, so I'm just going to wrap up by asking each of the panelists to give us a 10-second answer to the question of what advice would you give to folks who are watching this of how to ensure their digital transformation can be successful in this very challenging time. Todd, if you don't mind, maybe I'll start with you and then we'll go to Cindy. Any sort of parting words of advice that you would give to folks who are navigating this challenging environment?
That's a great question. I guess when we take a look at this, we tend to put ourselves in the shoes of our customers and try and view it from their perspective and say, what's going to impact them? And if this was to happen or that was to happen, how can we make sure that we can continue to service them and deliver the high level of reliability and quality that they expect from Dejero? Right. So edge, we just talked about edge connectivity. I think that's something we actually think a lot about. How do we manage latency to the edge? How do we manage multiple networks at the same time? So I think it's really just taking a really customer-centric approach is really what we try to do. And that's why we started our cloud journey early, because it seemed to our customer base that was important.
Yeah, that's a great point, Todd. Cindy, what do you think?
I think the theme I heard from everybody that I also agree with is you got to be always looking forward on, what technology you need so that when something happens, you're at least partially through the journey. If you're not keeping up, you're not going to be able to react fast enough. And, for us, the fact that we deployed as much as we deployed for remote work enabled us to get up, the majority of all the corporate and anybody who would do stuff in the cloud, and then only focus on the cases that were an issue. So for me, it's just making sure that you're consistently have that strategic plan of what your infrastructure and your investments need to be to support where the company needs to go. Because if you're behind, then you're just not going to be able to react fast enough.
Yeah, well said. Atilla, what key takeaway would you give to folks?
Yeah, I think 2020 has been an interesting year. I think I've used the words unprecedented times more than I care to repeat. And the irony, though, I think, Brandon, you kicked off by saying new norm, and I think that's probably the way we all need to be thinking about it as the new norm. And I think we need to think about our investments and the technology enablers we're implementing. Are they, as Todd said, are they working for our customers, and are they enabling our employees in this new norm? And if they're not, there's probably not the investments we should be making. Now, I think what was encouraging to hear from the panel is I think we're all collectively on the right track, and I think the technology enablers out there are driving the right outcome. I don't remember ever when I wrote a business case saying pandemic in the business case, but I think in reality, I think it's helping us navigate the challenging times we're in right now, but it's also the right strategies for our customers and employees at the end of the day, and that's where we need to focus.
Yeah, very true. Thanks. Andre, any key takeaways you'd like to share?
Of course, it depends on from which perspective, but in general, of course, I will try to force mobile workers and mobile and office independent infrastructure for the company itself as a part of the culture, of course, because we probably will see more of those pandemic issues in the future, for sure, because of the globalization. So we need to be prepared for that. And of course, from the other perspective, you have to adapt for all of this mobile AR, VR technologies in the next future, because this will be the key. If we are not able to travel and to do our works, personally, we have to adapt, because I guess travel in the way we did in the past will probably be not possible for the next future, not in the way at least.
Yeah, very true. And Dan, what stands out to you in the conversation and thinking about the future?
Yeah, I think everyone sort of nailed it. Super interesting time, obviously. Similar to the rest of the panel, do what's right for the consumers while considering what one can do to sort of automate your needs to a burst for the unknowns, if you will. I think some folks talk in terms of, is it native? Is it cloud? Is it hybrid? My explicit focus is building a flexible infrastructure environment to sort of meet demand of our developer and user community. So invest in the core infra, but also invest just as much into tooling and systems to enable those bursts for the unknowns. So use third party when needed, but it's ultimately the system which automates the consumption of those resources, which I think will win.
Yeah, really interesting. And Dhaval, last but not least, what are your key takeaways?
So I think the panelists have sort of quite aptly put the entire sort of technology enablement and the use cases for that, and the genuine impact that it's going to have on day-to-day sort of working environments going forward. The only thing I would add is the articulation of the need for digital transformation at a board level. I think when those cases, and I've interacted with a lot of board members, I think because some of these digital transformations, they have the right vision and they require support of the board to sort of deploy over a 5-7 year period. I think the articulation of that has to be very clearly along the lines of, this is where change has already taken place, and this is the right side of future that we should be positioned on. And there are some metrics around that. For example, you look at the NPS surveys for the firms who are digital first are significantly better than those of others. Similarly, the employee ESAT figures as well are aligned to that. So I think articulation of this digital transformation strategy combined with metrics like NPS and ESAT are a very strong combination to be taken at a board level in order to basically bolster sort of use cases and the investment required for the digital transformation.
Great point. Certainly great point. Great. Well, listen, I want to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. It's a really interesting discussion and points that we've made. Thanks again, everyone.